Hello, everyone, and welcome to essentially one of our final classes or one of our final lecture videos for our units here with health and wellness, this being our last unit, spiritual well-being. There may be another content area lecture video with spiritual well-being, but most likely our final 1 to 2, maybe 3, but probably 1 or 2 lecture videos will be in terms of defining or clarifying the tying together of all the various units into total well-being. That being said, I wanted to clarify a few concepts with spiritual well-being that we talked about from the last lecture video prior to Easter break, to be able to bring together some specific actions that can be taken toward greater spiritual well-being on a regular basis. And as I was weighing my discussion or talking about spiritual well-being for one of our final health and wellness classes with Ken 344, I was thinking, what can I wear that's spiritual without necessarily deliberately obvious toward being religious? I could put my cross on. I have some shirts I wear that be more typically worn at church. But that being said, I decided that I would wear something that really makes me feel like me, and I chose my Captain America shirt. Not because Captain America is necessarily the essence of spirituality, but we all have our ways we define ourselves, or that we see ourselves or hope for ourselves, and something about that idea of being a superhero for me is something that always helps provide meaning for me. The want to not just do something good for others, but to do as much as can possibly be done for others. And one of those things as a child all the way to the point of my life as an adult, almost 50 years old, 50 later this year, is the idea that I could somehow hopefully be a superhero for someone or for others, to do things that maybe people aren't able to do themselves, to be able to bring something good to the world of other people, not just for myself, but for others. In that way, to me, I think I'm serving God. And as silly as it might be, the idea of a superhero is one of those things for me. An idea, the Captain America character in the movies to me was just so well done, and how certain he was of his purpose, at least for the most part. We all have doubts, and what he wanted to do and how much he wanted to do things for others. Did a lot for me in terms of also being what I enjoy with superheroes, as well as what I value. Just something for me. That being said, talking about some concepts in spiritual well-being for us, referring to, first of all, reminding ourselves with spiritual well-being, it seems to be the case that most spiritual advisors, not just in terms of those for us in our church, or Lutheran or Christian in general, but the idea that well-being is the ability to experience and integrate meaning and purpose in life is one of those big 3 things for pretty much all spiritual advisors. Through our connectedness with others, our relationships is the second thing, and in no particular order here. And then we talked about art, music, literature, nature, and power. We're not going to talk about how you use art, music, literature, nature, and power necessarily, or a power greater than yourself, being God. We will talk briefly about that, of course. We're going to talk about that. Our source of our values. God, our belief in God and Jesus, the Holy Spirit, is essentially the source of our values. Where do our values come from? From nothing. Certainly from our recognition of the importance of values and what we place of value to provide meaning and purpose in our lives for helping others and in association with other people and helping with our relationships. But where does it all come from? Certainly my belief, and I think as a Christian, it's our belief that that comes from God. And those 3 concepts, having a specific meaningful purpose in life, relationships, how our health of our relationships, and the source of our values and what our values are, all play a primary role in our spirituality. We talked about the achieving greater levels of spirituality requiring exploration and experiential practice of a few different things, which we're going to talk about more in detail: meditation, prayer, forgiveness, our personal values, which we talked about in the past, as well as our healthy relationships we've talked about in the past a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more briefly about it, some of it being more review from things we talked about in the past. And of course, developing authentic relationship with a higher power, with God, with Jesus, with Holy Spirit. And it's generally accepted, certainly in Lutheranism, in most sects of Christianity, and from my background as a Catholic, that that we typically, there are times where some will say you should be referring to the Holy Spirit or God or Jesus, and certainly I would leave this to a theologian and a person who studied this in great depth more than me. But generally speaking, in my understanding, it's more of who you want, which version of God or which aspect of the triune of the Trinity of God that you want to speak with, communicate with, and God's okay with that. That said, meditation. Meditation, or thinking deeply and focused for a period of time. Quite simply, that's meditation. The benefits: decreasing stress and anxiety, giving yourself time on a daily basis, or as much as possible, at least anyway, to just pull away from things and to just focus on self. It has a great deal to do with decreasing stress and anxiety. That focusing on the self and gaining mindfulness helps to return to what's important and to be able to be more clear, improving our focus and gaining perspective and clarity just by taking a few minutes away from things. Improve physical health, lowered blood pressure, lowered heart rate, resting heart rate, the deeper controlled breathing, the breathing deeper, more relaxed is certainly going to make it less stress on the body as a whole, and therefore going to be healthier if that's something we can achieve on a regular basis. Certainly in the moment, reduce cortisol levels, and we know cortisol, as we talked about with physical well-being, cortisol is a natural hormonal response during stress, but the idea being we don't want cortisol levels to be elevated during times of where it's not necessary, where we should ideally be low stress. We want to make sure, in fact, that we are, or at least in terms of stressors, we don't want them to be impactful on a long-term basis. We want them to be acute stressors that come and go. We don't want them to be like the fight or flight concept from a very basic perspective on stress, as opposed to constant fight or constant fight and flight and no relaxed time, no downtime. That's not something we want to having and be having. And certainly meditation is one way of doing so. And of course, relaxed skeletal muscles actually helps as a way of helping us just relax physically as well. How to meditate, and like every area we're going to talk about here with spiritual well-being, this is by no means the book on how to do any of these things, but these are some good ideas for really getting started and progressing and improving in these areas, I think. How to meditate, finding a comfortable environment or place to sit for at least a few minutes. The advisement is to sit rather than to lay down or lie down, because you might fall asleep. So sitting so you can be mindful without necessarily falling asleep is crucial here. Standing tends to be too potentially stressful to be ideal, but hey, you do what you can where you are. Paying attention to your breathing and your body, being comfortable enough and relaxed enough that you can do so. Remaining in the present, the now. I've heard many speakers and presenters, whether they're from a spiritual focus or from just a wellness perspective or from a personal achievement and a self-help type focus point. The idea of being in the now sounds like a very strange concept of the now, but being here in this moment, me talking with the idea that I'm talking to you and not thinking about something else. Granted, there is always a battle that goes on. It's extremely difficult to do so, but the more we're able to do so, the more effective we can be at being who we are and at being someone to be of help to whoever we're working with and being around, to being more useful, to providing better service, to be providing a greater contribution, however you want to think about it. Being in the now is ultimately the most impactful we can be. It's quite difficult to fear the future or to mourn the past or regret the past when we're in the now. Life's problems have a tendency to not be that significant when we're really right where we are and not thinking about something that happened before or something that's coming up in the future, something being where we are right now. We all know the serenity prayer and talking about controlling what you can, letting go of what you can't, letting the troubles, and in Matthew referring to let tomorrow take care of itself. Those things we know, getting ourselves to be actually there is the key. Difference between knowing the path and following the path. Noticing if, when, and how your mind wanders. It's amazing how when you do give yourself time to meditate and you just kind of pay attention to how your mind wanders, of course, you'll realize what's getting to you the most, and which is kind of the key too. It's not just a matter of trying to get yourself too relaxed, to be focused on yourself and decrease anxiety and improving your focus and your physical well-being, but also to acknowledge those things that are affecting you right now, which is one of the ways that you get to decreasing stress and anxiety, focusing on yourself and having more mindfulness, improving your focus, all those things, and lowering or improving your health, right? And of course, returning to breath and the body repeatedly. I was reading about one expert who is an expert on meditation, or at least referred to as an expert in meditation. And they talked about how the first time they ever tried to do it, the idea was they thought, I could probably go so many hundred breaths before maybe I start to have my mind wander. And she noted that her first breath, she took one deep breath, inhale and exhale, and she was already thinking about something else. It's difficult. There's no question about it. And all things that are worth doing ultimately require practice, right? And I remember when I was doing basketball camps back when I was 13 years old, and the late Jack Ramsey, the former coach of the Portland Trailblazers, mentioning that it's not just practice, it's perfect practice. So whenever we practice, the goal is to have a perfect practice. And knowing that the next one may not be perfect, which is always the goal. And John Wooden also mentioned, another basketball coach for me, but he was also a very good spiritual advisor too. He always came back to the relationship with God and our relationship with God and what we do. And he also referred to the idea of you'll never reach perfection, but the goal should always be there, right? And that said, closing meditation with closing of the gradual return to normal, not taking a deep breath, and then going. You have to be able to slowly transition back into life again, to whatever it needs to be done or whatever the next phase is or the next action needs to be taken. Recognizing that when we're talking about normal, we want to gradually return toward normal. We don't want to actually be jumping from one thing to the next. It's kind of the purpose of meditation in the first place. And recognizing that all of this, including the benefit of meditation, but everything we do is a journey, not a destination. It's something on the process of the path which we're following, not a place we must get to, right? And long term, meditating for a few minutes every day, and then hopefully for longer periods, and then trying different kinds of meditation. There's guided meditations, there's solo meditation you do on your own, someone else leading you through it, whether it's something you listen to on a audio, or you watch a video while doing it, or you're in a situation, a place where you're doing it with someone else. Doing mindfulness, we're just focusing on self versus concept focused. So there are some forms of meditation that talk about a word or an idea and stay focused on the idea and try to stay focused on the idea, not letting it go, and keep focusing on that. Sometimes it's just the word itself. There's a lot of variations in that concept meditation as well. And single or group. There's a lot to be said for a group of people also doing the same thing. Can sometimes be very, very helpful. Can be distracting or it can be helpful. It really depends upon your needs, your wants, and your journey. That said, prayer. Prayer is essentially talking to God, right? And there's so many ways in which we can do it, inwardly versus outwardly, both publicly versus privately, right? Its benefits are allowing us to know God, to connect with God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Helps bring us peace of mind, reduce our anxiety, provides comfort and strength. It's always been an oddity for me. Oddity meaning it's just profound, I should say. Odd's the wrong choice of words. Every time, forever being a child going to church, I always felt better coming out of church. I attributed at times when being a child that maybe I was just looking forward to getting out of church. But really, there's something to be said for that community with God, with others, and for God and for others. That provides a great deal of comfort and strength. And that can be public or it can be in a communal atmosphere as well. Helps us understand God's will, taking the time to listen, talk and listen both, right? Bringing us toward forgiveness. There's no question that just talking through the day, talking about what's going on with you, your challenges, your concerns, and talking with God, whether it be, again, it's something that's inward, or something that's vocalized, or something that's more in a public situation, but helps bring us toward forgiveness. Keeps us away from distractions and temptation. I'm always amazed by that, for sure. You spending time talking with any of your friends, let alone more specifically toward God, and then thinking about doing something that you think may not be the best choice of actions, it's awfully hard to even go there when you're taking the time to pray. How to pray. Pray simply. It's often been written. The fewer the words, the better the prayer, said Martin Luther himself, right? Oops. And that said, reading scripture, more guided prayer, just reading the Bible, whether it's out loud or just taking time to read it, can be a form of prayer, or written prayers when referring to any of the creeds or the Father's Prayer or any terms of guided prayers can be helpful rather than it being just yourself, and maybe mixing that up to some extent to keep yourself more focused on speaking with God. Asking God for help, nothing wrong with asking God for help. Now, we also have a tendency to not be being thankful enough and being in gratitude enough. I'm very guilty of that. But that being said, you certainly should be asking God for help. It's generally understood to be expected that God expects to be hearing your concerns and your prayers from a standpoint of what do you need? What can I do to help you? God basically asking or suggesting to us. Being creative, possibly active and multisensory, lighting a candle, playing music. Music's a big one for me. Candles, when I'm really, really introspective, I have done, all depending on the mood and the timing, right? Not always ideal is to go light a candle, but certainly it can be something really, really helpful. Whatever it might be, drawing, painting, writing in a journal, all those things can be greater connectedness to God in praying. Making a list of requests in advance, things you want to be talking about, things that concern you. Making the list itself can be a form of prayer because you're thinking about how you're going to be communing with God. And also, but things to be thankful for and show gratitude for as well. Praying for the person you're talking to now is one of my favorites, reading that one. Something I really don't do very much. Sometimes I do because I'm just thinking about a person in a moment who's having a difficult time and I'm with them. But just taking a moment and when you give someone a hug or as you're talking to them, giving a silent prayer for someone is a pretty phenomenally powerful thing. Looking for prayer moments, private or public, right, can do a lot toward your relationship with God and helping you become better at praying and helping you connect more with others. Praying expectantly. Prayer, like anything, can be lifeless without purpose, without looking for answers to your questions. Nothing wrong with looking for answers to your questions, right? And of course, often advised is starting and ending the day with prayer. Asking God for help with your to-do lists, going through your day, lifting your situation or concerns to God, right? Forgiveness. It's not the same as condoning or being okay with something. A lot of people have a great deal of difficulty with, and I should say a lot of people, everybody does have a great deal of difficulty with forgiving at times. If it happens more difficult to forgive in general, then there's some greater issues and concerns we have with ourselves and our relationship with God and with others. That being said, for any number of reasons why that might be the case, right? But that said, it doesn't mean that we're being okay with what has happened or what has transpired or what has been done to us or done to someone else or that we believe is harmful to someone in some way. We're not condoning it. It's just a conscious, deliberate action or decision to cease feeling ill will or resentment or vengeful thoughts toward another. There's no question that whenever we have negative associations or thoughts towards someone, it's almost always something else that's really eating at us. There's something deeper there that we need to address, right? But releasing that hurt, that pain, that anger, and that resentment provides peace. I think we can all attest to that. When you've come to grips with something and you've released that hurt, that pain, that anger, and frustration, you just feel better. And finding a way to get closer and sooner to that is important. It frees you to live in the present, in the now, right? Allowing us to gain our personal power, it's often been referred to. Confucius referred to the idea of forgiving as, or if you're going to do something you shouldn't, before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. Because it's not just going to be the person you're seeking vengeance upon, and he was being potentially very harsh towards something much more significant than just a little, talk you might have. But that being said, it's still very much true. It hurts both parties being vengeful in any way, shape, or form. Doesn't mean it isn't hard to shake or hard to get past. It's something that we must get past if we're going to achieve closeness to God and closeness to others and closeness to ourselves. It brings you back to good physical and mental health. Negative emotions affect the immune system dramatically, right? The spiritual can absolutely affect the physical, let alone the emotional. Enables you to see the good again, the positive qualities in others. Once you forgive, it does free you up. There's no question when we have those resentful, vengeful, or frustrated or angry thoughts toward another person that we don't let go of. It's all encompassing. It certainly can be. It certainly is in the moment. How to forgive. Allowing time. First of all, this is big. To process anger and hurt, giving yourself time. How much time? We have to be reasonable with ourselves. And that's a fair question to be asking ourselves and putting up to God and asking other people whose opinions you value as well. as long as you're truly trying to listen, not just waiting for the answer you're looking for, right? Or looking for it only. Ensuring that the source of that particular action that you that requires forgiveness is not going to be repeated, right? If we're talking about relationships now that you may have an ongoing with someone, if that's not the case, that's not applicable. But someone you intend to keep a relationship with, move on to what's next. Simply do the next thing that needs to be done. One of the not easiest, but one of the simplest ways to get past being resentful or angry or hurt and getting to forgiveness is moving on to what needs to be done next. Making a new agreement with yourself, less blaming of others and understanding more about yourself. No question about it, right? Much that can play a role. And we've talked in class about the idea of those moments when you're angry or frustrated at something, and I said it a moment ago as well, it's almost always something else. And my anger comes out sometimes when I'm playing video games by myself. I don't play a lot, but I play a couple games on a regular basis. And with driving, partly because I can say things or use language I know I shouldn't, and refer to things in ways I shouldn't to be saying, and just general ill will that I'm exhibiting, which really I'm doing it to release more than anything else, but it's not helpful. And ultimately, I need to recognize that and come to grips with it myself. And we all have those situations in various forms at various times. If possible, and you wish the relationship to continue, tell another person how you feel. I feel whatever it is, when the time is right, after we've done these three things first, asking the questions you need to have answered if you want that relationship to continue, right? And you're going to be able to forgive or have the relationship continue, not just forgive in general. Setting new boundaries for the relationship so it's understood. You don't have to put yourself in a situation where you're in that same place again, and explain that you're choosing to forgive. Telling the person that. And these things aren't necessarily required, certainly, but may be helpful, right? Personal values. Spiritual personal values that must be present to properly integrate our purpose and our meaning with God, others, and ourselves, that are seen pretty much undeniable and pretty much consistent across religions and spiritual perspectives. Truth, what's vital, what's important, what's known. Righteousness, being clear in our moral purpose, and it doesn't mean judging. So many people have a hard time with righteousness and that they are judging. It's not judging. It's being clear about right and wrong and understanding what God expects of us, which is a process. It's not something like, I know what's right and wrong. I know it. No, it's not you know it. It's in a moment. In that moment, you ultimately recognize the right or the wrong. And if you don't, then you need to seek advisement both from God and from others. All of us do, if we have difficulty with that decision. Peace. The not having ill will toward others, and wanting to achieve peace. Love should be a given. These are not in any particular order. You could argue that potentially could be first. If you care enough about other people, you don't tend to have long harboring issues. It's often the first thing that comes back to, that's often brought back for couples therapy or therapy between any relationship that someone is trying to be keep going while still either getting past the problem or dealing with the problem, not getting past it, making it go away, but certainly dealing with the problem, is that you have to come back to love. You have to come back to how much you care about this other person, this other party. You can't get there toward forgiveness, toward sharing personal values, if you cannot establish that basic beginning of caring toward one another, right? Nonviolence. It certainly should never be the first action taken. There's much to be said far beyond the scope of this course about the differences between taking action and defending oneself, but it doesn't have to be we don't have to go to the nth degree of explanation, I think, on what that really means to know that God does not want us to be violent, does not want us to be seeking ill will toward other people. And that said, a couple things that were not specifically part of the big five there, if you will, but were more broad-based, and I thought was just worth noting. A couple of spiritual type experts were mentioning the idea of, I thought was interesting, intellectual development, that valuing intellectual development, the understanding of things, and taking time to contemplate, not just meditate, but contemplate, thinking on things. which you can argue is there's crossover between contemplation and meditation, all depending upon how you're going about it, right? No question that if someone's truly an intellectual, and that's kind of one of the ideas behind getting your PhD, as a matter of fact, too. If you're truly intellectual, if you're truly seeking higher levels of intellectual development, you don't judge. You just look for greater understanding, greater verification, greater clarification, greater understanding and the intricacies and relationships that exist, as opposed to looking for differences or getting angry, getting frustrated. You want to understand and you want to be involved in the greater good, right? Openness to change. Being closed off certainly is not a value that is worthy of a true level of spirituality. We certainly want to be opening ourselves to change. Most spiritual authorities of the world seem to agree that ultimately, as I mentioned before, relationships, values, and purpose in life are the three pillars of spirituality. The question is, do our values drive us toward or away from spiritual well-being? Like self-enhancement. There's nothing wrong with achievement, success, ambition, as long as it doesn't negatively affect someone else. I can't remember who said it. I should have it quoted. I remember the quote specifically, but there's only one fundamental human right, the right to do whatever it is you want. And of course, right after that comes, and the right to pay the consequences for your actions, or to be held accountable for your actions. So it's the right, and then there's a consequence. It's really, the second one's not really a right. There's a consequence of the right. So yeah, you can do whatever you want, but there's always something that comes of it. And if we're doing our best to seek a higher level of spirituality, and in this case, to achieve greater level of success or achieve something in our lives, as long as it is with the understanding that we're trying to help others along the way, yes, we must be helping ourselves. And I've always struggled with this. I think a lot of people do. It doesn't mean you can't make money, you can't achieve great things, but it shouldn't be at the expense of others. And that's what we're trying to not be the case. And of course, seeking power, we all want to have authority in a given moment, in a given discussion between two people. There's almost always a situation where there's two people engaged in a conversation. You can tell that there's back and forth the authority in a moment in a given decision or a given topic of conversation. There is always that, as long as we're willing to give that authority back, give it away in the next moment. And this is a big one for me. I've struggled with this for my whole life, about the idea of wealth and making money. By itself, it is not a bad thing. If it is something that we do for ourselves and we don't seek to help other people, then that's a greater concern. Conservation, security, social order. There is intricacies of things we see and that we have control over, and ultimately we're trying to find a greater place in the social order, rather than find ways to focus on differences is a key. Conformity and obedience, well, certainly obedience to God, obedience at times to others, right? But seeking obedience from someone else is a difficult one. There's a time and a place from a standpoint of for the welfare of someone. When you know something about an idea that maybe the other person doesn't, to tell your child, don't cross the street, obey me, because if you do cross the street right now, there's a car coming. That's a major life thing. There is a difference between that and someone who seeks power through obedience, right? Tradition through humility. I've always felt being humble was key in really helping others and actually serving God as well as other people. Certainly do everything we can to be better than we are, but at the same time being humble and accepting that there's always levels and there's always places for us to go that we are not where we are not yet. Devoutness in our devotion to God and to others, really. Openness to change, self-direction, being creative, seeking our freedom. Those things can be helpful or they can be hurtful. Stimulation, leading an exciting life. That can be really, really helpful as long as it's not to the detriment of other people. Transcendence, benevolence and helpfulness, already kind of mentioned. Universalism, social justice and equality. Those are difficult things to come to, things that we kind of build toward. I think we come into college, then we go about our lives and we leave college, and all of a sudden we start focusing on self, trying to establish a life, and it becomes very difficult at times to be thinking of others at the same time we're trying to find something for ourselves and get ourselves a home to live in and a family to have and support that family. Those things are real challenges, and they will be real challenges for many of you soon or later, and for all of us at some point. As far as relationships, we talked about this before. Healthy relationships with ourselves, loving and believing in ourselves and our purpose in the world. That's really what a healthy relationship is, or at least in the moment. It's not always something you can do on an absolute all-time basis, but certainly in the moment. Consistent shared healthy values must be there between you and God, between you and others. Health, we talked about all these things: health, vitality, love, contribution, trust, honesty, freedom, growth and learning, impact, intelligence, achievement, accomplishment, happiness and fun, loyalty, gratefulness, wealth and investments. Feel free to add anything else that's of interest to you, but we have to have shared values of those we interact with to be healthy with our relationships, right? Being free or striving to not be defined by stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. We mentioned this before a few weeks back. There's a difference between recognizing how we're different from other people and negative or harmful associations with those differences. There's a big difference there. Has been often been said and been written, judge not lest ye be judged. Remember that momentary interactions or communication is 7% what you say, verbal, 38% the tone you use. It's still verbal, and then 55%, more than half of it, is our body language, what we don't say, right? And of course, this has a greater meaning when we're in person than we're necessarily looking at someone through a video, but still those things can be conveyed, and we get a feeling of or a perception of those things as someone speaking to us or as we're involved in a conversation. Hopefully a two-way, not a one-way, right? Unfortunately, this by nature is a little bit one-way, but certainly when we're one-on-one with someone or in a group, we want to be making sure it's a back and forth between others as opposed to just us doing the talking when it's our turn to talk. Spiritual well-being, on our final aspect of activities or things that we're focusing on, aspects of spiritual well-being. Developing a relationship with God. Seems only appropriate to finish with that. Developing a relationship with God may or must require loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul. I don't know if I'd be saying may in this case. This would be a must. Some of these are maybe mays. This is definitely a must, right? Loving your neighbors, loving those that are not you. Everybody. There's no real neighbors is just everyone, isn't it? A standpoint that's not specifically family. Loving your family, which is difficult because sometimes the people closest to us who we care about the most can rub us the wrong way the fastest and the easiest at times because we know them so well. We tend to have associations with things that are said and done. We have to be so cautious with this. To always remind ourselves coming back to love, right? Saying, hey, I love this person. I'm mad at them right now. I'm not so mad that I don't want them to be part of my life. I'm not so mad that they are not someone I want to share my time with. In this moment, I'm mad. I'm going to go away right now. I got to deal with some things, and we'll talk about this later. Those kinds of things are very natural, but just flat out shunning someone is really going against God when we do that with our family. Loving your spouse. I don't think anybody in our class is yet married, but at some point you may be. And I know certainly with me, with my spouse, if I don't have a solid relationship with my spouse, if at a moment where I'm feeling distant because I'm stressed about something or she's stressed about something, it definitely creates challenges for us to be able to be good to ourselves, let alone each other, and to be connected with God. It's integral for that to be the case, for us to be loving our spouse and never forgetting that once we're married, right? That said, knowing God can come through prayer, which we've already talked about, scripture, reading the Bible, service to others, just being with others, and life experiences, right? Those are opportunities. Serving God, not money or materialism, through service to self and others. When I like to think of having a job or making money from what I do, it needs to be serving God in some aspect, in some way, through serving other people and helping them further their lives so that they can also serve God and serve others. Practicing gratitude. I've mentioned this before, something I have challenges with because I'm always trying to get better in my idea, in my head anyway, and in what I do and working with other people as well, let alone with God. But then I forget sometimes to say thanks, to show appreciation. And sometimes that is one of the most important things we possibly can be doing. Just saying, hey, I'm having a tough time right now, but thanks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of my challenges right now and doing what you can, even though I don't know what that means. But thank you. Thank you. Amazing what those words and those thoughts can do for you and the feelings that they put out there, how they can bring us back to God. Persevering through difficult times. Well, we're dealing with that right now with COVID-19, the challenges we have with self-quarantining. When I am in the now, as an example, it's not a problem. When I'm thinking about what I'd rather be doing or could be doing that I can't do, then yeah, that's going to create problems and it makes it difficult. But rather than just being in the now, it is so crucial to be able to connect with God, to connect with ourselves, to connect with other people, to remind ourselves that there are some things we can't control. And there will come a point when these things too shall pass, right? All things do. All things do. And in this case, we always want the good things to stay and the challenging things to pass. We can only do so much. Obeying God's commandments. That's an integral part of obviously what God has laid down for us that we must be following on a regular basis. Practicing righteousness, and this is often confused and referred to it before, doing what's morally right, just, pure, and holy. Not saying to someone, you're not doing this, calling someone out, unless that is someone that's close to us that we can be of help to. The question coming to, are we going to improve the probability of them serving God and serving others better by bringing this up with them? If not, then we are really just being judgmental as opposed to being righteous and trying to do what's morally right. There is always that decision as well, not just for our own actions, but how we convey that to other people. Final thoughts. So remember, dates of importance. You've got your paper due at the end of this week. You'll have another post as well for this week up shortly. Your spirituality quiz, the final quiz, the last quiz you will have, I'm going to make due over a week and a half away, basically on Friday the 1st, for you to essentially complete that quiz. I'll have it up this week. It's going to be the same 30-question quiz as before that you can take on your own time at your final quiz. Okay. Your paper is also due by that day. That's a mistake. That should say 5/1 as well. That being, it still needs to be the same day. That preferably going to be due completely by 5/1. Okay. Everything is due by that weekend, your project as well, because I have to turn grades in going into that final week. So that's really should be 5/1 as well. You can have all that possibly due. If you have challenges, let me know. Giving yourself more time to do it. I'm planning to get as much as I can up and posted for you sooner rather than later so you can work through things at your self-pace these last couple weeks. My concern is always whenever I get too much up at once that people just rush through information. It's always a challenge. It's always an ongoing challenge you're going to have in the days, weeks, months and years ahead of you in your life, let alone for this class, is when you have a lot in front of you, do you just try and take it all at once, or do you take it in small parts to get the most from it? It's always the challenge, isn't it? Call me, email me with questions. We'll have the next lecture video up hopefully over the next couple days, and we will talk again very soon. Hope you're taking good care of yourselves, and I look forward to communicating with you as soon as possible.